Forming statements using the affirmative, also known as indefinite and negative words. When we think about making affirmative and negative statements, we should think about the affirmative being something that is happening. So for example, if we say that ella habla inglés, we're saying that she speaks English. A negative statement is something that happens when we're saying something does not happen. So the negative of that sentence would be ella no habla inglés. Ella no habla inglés, meaning she does not speak English. So by putting the no in the statement, we're making the statement negative. Another way to think of no is by thinking of it as a negative word. Another example of an affirmative statement is él es profesor. He is a teacher. So this is an affirmative statement because this is something that is happening. The statement becomes negative when we put the no word there, the negative word, so that's él no es profesor. He is not a teacher. We have several other ways of making statements affirmative and also negative. We can make a statement affirmative by using an affirmative or an indefinite word. These are words that aren't very specific. Examples of these are algo, something, alguien, somebody, algún, which can be alguno, alguna, algunos, and algunas. That means some or something. Siempre means always. También means also. O means either or, and pero means but. All of these words would be considered affirmative or also known as indefinite words. You use these in statements when you're saying that something does happen. Now, when each affirmative word also has a negative word, a negative counterpart. So the opposite of algo, something, is nada, nothing. The opposite of alguien, somebody, is nadie, nobody. The opposite of algún, some or nothing, is ningún, no or none. Also nothing. Siempre, which means always, has two opposites, nunca or never, jamás, never or never ever. También, which means also, has an opposite, which is tampoco, neither, not either. Either or, o, its opposite is neither nor, ni. And the opposite of pero, but, is sino, which means but rather. So just like when you were putting the no in the statement, él es profesor, he is a teacher, to make it él no es profesor, he is not a teacher, you can still use these negative words in the same way to make these statements negative. So here's an example. If you want to say that no one speaks, you can say nadie habla. Nobody speaks. That statement is negative because we have the nadie there before the verb. An important thing to note here is in all of these negative statements, you will find the negative word before the verb. Another way to say this statement, however, is no habla nadie. It still means that nobody speaks, but I have my negative no before the habla and I've moved nadie after the verb. So here's a rule that you must remember, and you may want to write this down. A negative statement must have at least one negative word before the verb. Let's go back and take a look at what we just did here. For the first way of saying this, nobody speaks, we had nadie habla. There's a negative word here, nadie, but it's before the verb. But if we go back and look at the other way of saying this, nadie has moved after the verb. So in order to keep nadie after the verb, I have to put a no before it, because the only way that I can make this statement negative is by at least making sure that there's some negative word before the verb. Let's take a look at another example. If you want to say that he never eats, él nunca come. Notice that the word nunca is coming before the verb come. He never eats. But there's another way to say this. You can say él no come nunca. So we have moved the word nunca after the verb, but we still have to have a negative word there, so we're going to use no. Something important to note here is that we have two negative words in the statement. So that means that we can use double negatives in Spanish, and that's perfectly acceptable. And in fact, something else you want to remember is that you will never have a statement where you'll have a negative word and an affirmative word. So you would not put no with the opposite of nunca, which is siempre. Let's take a look at another example. We want to say that Alfredo does not dance either. So neither or either is going to be tampoco. Tampoco is a negative word, so I'm putting it before my verb baila. Alfredo tampoco baila. But there's one other way to say this. You can move tampoco to after the verb baila, so it becomes Alfredo no baila tampoco. Same meaning. Alfredo does not dance either. We've just moved tampoco to after the word baila, so if we're going to keep the negative word after the verb, we have to put another negative word before it. What about the words algún, alguno, alguna, algunos, algunas, ningún, ninguno, ninguna, ninguno, and ningunas? All of these words will be used before a noun, which means that they must agree with the noun in number and gender. So when you're using algún and ningún, the only time that you'll use it is before a singular masculine noun. So you have algún libro, some book, ningún libro, no book. You will never say alguno libro or ninguno libro. You must be sure to drop that O before the masculine singular noun. When libros becomes plural, it becomes algunos libros and ningunos libros. I made a mistake here, but it shouldn't be alguna amigo, it should be alguna amigo. It's ninguna amiga. These words, alguno, ninguno, alguna, ninguna, they must agree with the noun that they're with. Let's do some practice. We have a couple of examples. After I've gone over the examples, please be sure to complete these sentences and write the entire new sentence and put it in the drop box. So take a look at the first example. I'm starting with the affirmative statement, which means that something is happening, and I'm saying él es profesor. He is a teacher. But I've made that statement negative by making sure that I have a negative word before my verb, él no es profesor. Take a look at the next one. ¿Tiene algo que declarar? Well, algo makes the statement affirmative because I'm asking, is this happening? I'm not asking if anything is not happening. But the statement becomes negative, so I'm going to say no, no. There's my negative before the verb. Then I have to remember my opposite of algo is nada, so I put nada after my verb. No, no. Tengo nada que declarar. Take a look at one more example. It says, ¿hay algo para comer? And then the opposite of algo is nada. So I'm going to say no, because I'm keeping my negative opposite of algo after the verb nada. So no hay nada para comer. So let's see what you would do with these sentences here. The affirmative statement is tiene alguna pluma. Alguna is my word that makes this statement affirmative, so I need to figure out, okay, what would I fill in the blank here? The opposite of alguna. What would the opposite of alguna be? Ninguna. Write that sentence down and do 2 through 7 on your own.